Hi, my name is Alexis, and I am doing the infant formula shortage crisis from 2022 that is current today. If you see me looking over, it's because I'm doing my phone right here so I can see. Technical difficulties with Zoom. Okay, so this is an accidental crisis, and it started February 17th and of 2022. And so, meaning that this is unintentional crisis, no one knew this was going to happen. This was something nobody was prepared for, especially Abbott Nutrition in Michigan. No one was ready for this. And what this crisis is, it was a recall of all powdered formula from the company Abbott Nutrition. And so it recalled all of the powder formula, including one of the biggest brands of formula, which is Similac. And it was from anything that had the expiration from April 1st and later on. It affected all of the infants, toddlers, or children that were on the formula. And it was because of a suspected bacteria called Chronobacter. It's a foodborne illness, and what it is this illness was in the formula. We'll go in a little bit more depth on that in a minute. First, we're going to talk about the timeline of the Abbott Company. And so in 1894 is when the Abbott Company first started by Abbott himself. He was a doctor. In 1916, they had their first production of medicine. And then 1964 is whenever they went into business / partnership with Similac, which is the main topic of our crisis, and it is a formula for children. And Abbott got their pledge that says, we make our product as if it was for our own families, and they live by that standard. And by 2010, it was the largest pharmaceutical company in India, and then 2022 happened. I want to say 2022 was their first big crisis. Every company has had a recall. Abbott has had recalls, but this recall was such a crisis because it left a shortage of formula. There was no formula anywhere for any kids or any families to get. And so that's what made it a crisis. And I believe that was their first. I did not find any other evidence of them having any other crisis such as this one. But I did find different recalls, just as if they also had a recall later in the year of 2022 in October. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. Okay. Oh, I apologize. Give me 1 second. It is messed up, and this is why. I wish it was working the other way. Okay, so the illness is Chronobacter. So that is what I'm hoping it is, because I looked it up and I even Googled how to say it, and that's what they gave me. So it is naturally found in the environment, and what it does is it lives in dry foods. So for people that don't know, formula is a dry food. There's different brands and different types. There's a liquid and there's a powder. For the individuals that do not have kids, so formula is how you feed your kids, of course, and it takes a lot of preparation. It's not easy. You don't just put it in a bottle and give it to them. Water has to be right temperature. The formula has to be stored a certain way, because if not, it can get bacteria. And this is how it got the Chronobacter bacteria. So if the formula is not stored in its proper container or properly sealed, it will get any type of bacteria. You can live in the cleanest home and there's still going to be bacteria in that house. The water has to be a certain temperature. You have to heat it up a certain way. It takes a lot to make a bottle for a child. Even breast milk. Breast milk can have bacteria because everything goes bad. There's an expiration date for everything. There's an expiration date on all formula, and there's an expiration date on breast milk. You leave it in the fridge, can't do it for too long. Can't do it for too long in the freezer either. So that is what had happened. That powdered formula got the bacteria just as if it was any starches, herbal teas, or anything like that. And the CDC typically receives 2 to 4 cases per year. That's only what's documented. There could be way more than that, but we don't know. It's just what's documented. And this bacteria can lead to several severe things. One can be sepsis, which is a blood infection, and the other one can be meningitis. And that is where it surrounds the brain and the spinal cord. So typically the bacteria infection can be fatal in infants. So infants are going to be the primary holder of this disease. So typically it starts within the first few days and weeks of an infant's life. And they're the ones that are most likely going to contract this infection and keep it and have serious outcomes from it, meaning any infant that's younger than 2 months. And these can be anything. The worst case for it is either the infant has died from this infection or it can develop meningitis from it. It mainly is also seen in infants that are born prematurely, which means they were born early. And anybody that knows that has children, if a child is born early, then it already has complications. There's always difficulties with babies being born early. And I mean, there's also difficulties in babies being born full term. And then it also weakens the immune system, which babies already have a weak immune system. And it usually starts with about a fever and poor feeding. And when I mean poor feeding, I don't mean from the family's perspective, I mean from the baby. There's already so much to look into as being a parent. There's so many cues a baby gives that you still have to learn, especially being a first-time parent. So when I mean poor feeding, I mean, is the baby even eating? Is it drinking like they should? Eating like they should? Taking the bottle all the way? Is it spitting up too much? How is it breathing while it's eating? It can have excessive crying or low energy. And a baby is already hard to tell. You have no idea what a baby is even doing because most of the time they don't tell you anything because they can't talk. And so you're having to learn everything about that baby. And having to learn on a sick baby is even harder. And some worst case is also seizures. Having a baby period with seizures is scary, and then you're also having to look to see if it's even starting in a baby. The next is the recorded events from this illness and crisis. There was a total of 4 that were dealing with this bacteria, and there were 4 that were hospitalized with the bacteria and 2 reported deaths. Even though this was a national crisis, mainly 3 states seen the most of the deaths, which the main one was Ohio with 2. But what I found interesting was that 4 reports were mainly from the Chronobacter illness and infection, and then 1 report was from, I'm sorry, this one really gets me, Salmonella. I can never say it, I do apologize. But all of them, all 5 cases and all went with the same thing, and they all believe that it was connected. So I found that interesting. And then the affected parties. So we all know formula goes to everywhere. It goes to hospitals, medical offices, stores in the United States, Puerto Rico, and the list goes on. They're everywhere. But with that and a recall so huge, they were all gone. All formula was gone. And I know that because I personally experienced this because my son was born right in the middle of the pandemic in this crisis. There was no formula. My doctor's office didn't have any. The stores didn't have any. The shelves were empty. You couldn't even order any from online. And the CHOC put out a list, and that list was for any alternate formula options. And as soon as that list hit, all gone too. There was Parents' Choice by Walmart, gone. Up and Up by Target, gone. And the list goes on and on. They put out that list to help parents because Similac is the biggest contributor to powdered formula. But everything was gone. Couldn't find anything. You still can barely find anything. And worst case is there was also people that were buying this formula and reselling it, making it worse, making it higher, making it more difficult for parents to get their hands on this. We didn't know how we were going to feed our kids. It was terrifying, but we had to keep pushing every day. My son started drinking regular milk and started eating Whole Foods. Luckily, he was old enough to do that. Some weren't that lucky. But during this crisis, the Abbott Nutrition Company learned to make things better. They weren't ready for this, so they weren't prepared at all. But they got it, meaning they brought in FDA specialists. They helped. They made things better, meaning they were giving practices and guidelines because no company this big should fail inspection because that company holds so much in its hands, meaning so many lives. And those babies were needing that company, and it wasn't there. They also were implementing new technologies because it's 2023, the world is revolving, and some companies are left in the older days. That's pretty much the way to put it. They needed new technology to understand this formula more and to pay attention to what's in it and anything. Like, they needed to know every single detail before putting it out on the shelves again for kids, because kids' lives were at stake. And kids are our future, and without them, there are no futures. And they also decided that they were going to develop a new plant. So they plan to open their plant in 2023, which is this year, in Iowa. I apologize. And it is going to bring 450 new jobs and is costing them roughly around $500 million. But it's needed. This company needs it. And they knew that. They knew that they needed this because of the kids. And there's also one thing I wanted to go back on. They also had another recall in October of 2022. And I wanted to come on this and speak on it because it wasn't as big as the crisis that they handled in February. This recall was just on the liquid formula because the lids weren't screwing on completely. So that meant that they were going bad. Just like regular milk, all milk goes bad. Does not matter. And so they recalled that, and they made sure they have, if you've never been, I would advise you to go to abbott.com, and they have the best interview resources. Everything that they have online is so beneficial. I could go all the way back to when the company started, and I could see all of their interviews, all of their mentions, and all of their papers or articles. I saw everything. It listed everything. And that's how that they connect with the customers around them. And I found that very beneficial because they made sure that everyone knew that they wanted it not to be felt as a crisis as in February. They were like, hey, just throw those away. Get the new ones. They're fine. They're good. Like, they twist on enough so that they're not going to go bad. Abbott didn't fail from this. and they made sure that they were going to strive and continue to give greatness to their families and to their customers because they knew that they needed it the most. I thank you for being here, and I do apologize. I really went in depth in my first one, and I wish you could have seen it. It was the best video I ever had, but I do thank you for being here. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I look forward to hearing from you.